The premiere got the season off to a good start, but could momentum be retained with the 2 episodes that followed up from it? Well, it's time to see how they fared in this double-header edition of Pones N Stuff. We kick things off with Uprooted, and in all fairness, I'm going straight to the point with this one. It's bad. Now, how bad, you may be asking? Well, outside of the great musical number and the place where we belong, this episode just trundled along, minding its own menial, predictable business, annoying me with its bland, barren, and bemusing contents. It could have been fun if it didn't decide to replicate Season 5's post-premiere fare, Castle Sweet Castle, almost verbatim. And given how stupefying that experience was, they could have picked a better way to showcase things. But they went full steam ahead with it, and what we got was nothing special under any circumstance as a result. The musical number at its climax offered a small window of quality to peek through the dampened tundra that it resided within, much like Treehouse of Friendship did, sprouting out from that cave in the episode itself, but it meant, despite its premise failing to excite, an episode worth very little still managed to stand out despite everything being against it. It set up a potentially foreshadowable role for the Student 6 going forward in this season and reinforced their core personality dynamics and aspects of their personality which were already starting to sprout in prior episodes, but outside of that there really wasn't much else to even celebrate, which is not a good thing. I mean, in comparison to Twilight moving on from the Golden Oak Library in that Season 5 episode, which happened at the exact same stage in the season 4 years ago, the only difference is that that prior episode had much more emotional impact, because you had 4 seasons of connection to empathise with. You didn't really have that here with the characters or the figure which is no longer there, which isn't that great to say the least. This episode had scraps that it could not utilise effectively. There was no direction to take what little there was and make something from it at all, which is quite depressing. I mean, considering that it also didn't have the structural rigidity to even attempt to rectify that is an even bigger problem. I mean, what they attempted to do, what little they got from it, was marginally okay at its best, and floundering at its worst. I appreciated some of the elements of comedy, the linking of each student's role to how the individual societies they came from have conditioned them to act towards decision making, and the occasional animation flourishes alongside the similar ones with the score being produced, but that was it. This was an episode that was perfectly happy to settle into its role as filler between the premiere and the 200th episode, and portrayed that with emblematic prominence, which makes its minor qualities somehow stand out amongst a background of sheer nothingness. Its themes of remembrance and moving on were used as the driving moral point, which when subtly encoded properly managed to hit with gravitas, especially once the meaning of the musical number came to light, serving as an allegory for the show as a whole when all is said and done. But most of the time, it was bluntly handled, meaning the strength of friendship against fractures moral that came right at the end of the last act felt just as recycled as one could be, because we've heard it quite a few times before, leaving just the musical number as the lone highlight along with those aforementioned positive crumbs to pull this mind-numbingly episode from the depths of the abyss. Casually, it was a pleasantly watchable episode, but once I put it under the critical microscope, its true colours reflected back at me that it was a boring and forgettable one. If not for that song, I swear it would have ended up in the bottom of my episode ranking trash heap. It was lucky enough to even escape that. Then again, there's always one episode a season that's fortunate enough to do that and not have that incredibly negative medal being bestowed upon them. So I'm hoping that Allspark and Hasbro have gotten the worst out of the way early, because I am not going to hold future episodes with as much sympathy. Seriously, this deserved worse, but got away very lightly. Overall, Uprooted scored a total of 5 out of 25, which is an E+. Ouch. Well, that's quite a fall from the season premiere, isn't it? I love the Student 6, but this wasn't the best use of them, and considering how much time there is left to round them out, flesh them out, and give them something fun to do, I'm just annoyed that this episode even happened, because it's just an absolute waste. And again, they spent half of Season 8 doing fuck all, so this just goes with the record. You gotta focus on the main characters that people are here to see, not the new ones that actually need some build to them. Because based on what this episode has set up, they have importance later on. I am pretty much sure of it. It's foreshadowable based on that goddamn treehouse. So for the love of God, make use of it while you bloody can, because little bits of filler like this with no purpose, apart from the one small tiny bit that came from it, really isn't a good thing at this stage. You may be early on, but the fact I'm this frustrated at this point is not a good thing. Anyway, Season 9 had the 200th episode following on straight from this, so hopefully that will do better. I mean, they wouldn't let it fail. Surely they wouldn't, right? You're damn right they didn't. Sparkle 7 is an episode that I struggled to find fault with in comparison to what came before it, and that is saying something, isn't it? You'd expect a story that consisted of various different plot threads that came from the minds of Ashley Ball, Andrea Livman, Tara Strong, Tabitha St. Germain, and Kathy Westlock would degenerate into a convoluted and spiraling mess. Well, thanks to the help of seasoned show veterans Josh Haber and Nicole DeBuck, it was fleshed out and structured into a story consisting of an ensemble cast and a vast premise that went about its business seemingly without error to be shown. Shining Armor and Twilight's relationship finally got fleshed out, so many random but interesting scenarios played out without compromising each other, allowing many characters to get their say and stay true to their character archetypes. It could flourish visually and audibly, while also giving us morals that were sewn into the fabric of the episode with room to spare. It was tense and extremely funny, while taking on an escapade that was extremely balanced pace-wise, while tying into the continuity of not just this season's continuing arc, but the episodes of the past as well. It's not happening just for the sake of it, feeling like time is actually advancing in this universe, which is brilliant, and it played to its strengths by acknowledging so goddamn much. This was so well put together, it's just fantastic. While I'm extremely happy that this episode has managed to go on its merry way without tripping up on itself, it has, however, stumbled at the final hurdle because it's not a perfect episode. Yes, it managed to slip away from grabbing onto the fabled clutches of the holy grail of a perfect score by this much. Yes, what minor things that I've had a problem with were not fleshed out enough to where they couldn't really lend the helping hand that was needed to drag it across the line. While the themes of sibling rivalry, competition, military planning, and risk-taking bled from every pore of this episode, alongside the moral of not taking risks for the sake of it proved to be very good indeed, an underlying moral of not underestimating those who are weaker or ostracized was not utilized to its fullest potential, especially given how important Spike and Luna's roles were in the story looking back on it. Sure, it made itself known subtly over the course of the episode and was subsequently well pronounced at its conclusion, but have it given more attention would have made it hit with more weight than what the other aspects had garnered for themselves in retrospect. Visually, some of the transitions were reused or weren't as seamless as they could be, as well as the split screen being reused from Uprooted alongside a lack of major set piece, proving that despite its efforts, I couldn't award full marks. And when you couple in the flat layering of the spy laser scene, dampening of the dynamic movement that was on show within it, it's easy to see why I had to trim the scores just a little bit. That being said, everything else flourished, with Tabitha St. Germain stealing the show with her best rarity vocal performance to date, and you can fight me on that, whilst Zephyr Breeze came back proving that he wasn't a one-dimensional, one-episode hate-sink antagonist after all. The icing on the goddamn cake. This episode was a barrel of fun that surprised and impressed in almost every turn, from the well-executed character writing to a varied and aloof score to the rock-solid story to the mostly great morals and visuals. It ticked so many boxes and showed that even a premise such as this can be executed well when everything just works. Why the voice actors were not drafted into the writing room sooner, I will never know, but the show's decision to honour the women who made these characters possible by acknowledging their ideas was a stroke of goddamn genius, giving me one of the highlights of not just this season, but the show as a whole. If this is what the VAs and two of the best writers of the show are capable of, I would not mind seeing it happening again, considering the gold dust that it created here. Overall, Sparkle 7, yes I hate that title too, scored a total of 23 out of 25, which is an A. Now that's more like it. In closing, once again, this show has highlighted its quality divergence. Back to back, week to week, we have once again been blessed with 2 episodes of diverging quality that highlight this show's problem with consistency, something that I've made note of many times. I'm thankful that it's happened this early on, and they've hopefully, by the look of it, shot the problem straight goddamn in the head and left them behind, because the next 2 episodes that I review for this channel in a fortnight are not going to be given the same leniency, so to speak, if it does end up happening, because I only really allow for this to happen once before I get irritated, to say the least. Now, the fact that we can go from a tired and stale, poor episode to a well-constructed, refreshing, outstanding one from one episode to the next is quite worrying, because it does show a trend that they've organised the schedule to where you really don't know what you're going to get week to week, and that is a bad thing. I mean, the difference between an E+ rated episode and an A is quite damning. You've seen how those numbers rank out. It is ridiculous. So I'm hoping that this is only a small stumble, this is only a small bump in the road, and the rest of it is smooth, because if not, I'm going to be back here completely and utterly crapping on them, which is not what I want to do. I want Season 9 to be a celebration of this show. I want it to be an embodiment of what this show has been and will be forever. And, well, I can take the occasional blips if it follows up with something quite fantastic as it has done here, but oh boy, the fact that these 2 episodes were made by pretty much the same team, it's night and day, it's unbelievable, it's madness, really. Just shows you what happens when a show like this just goes and does its thing, isn't it? You can never expect anything. Now, Uprooted left me beleaguered and quite worried, whilst Sparkle 7, well, as you can tell, it gave me an injection of happiness that makes me really, really optimistic for the rest of the season. That shows you how much of a damn good healing job it did, and I'm hoping that Point of No Return and Common Ground, the episodes I do review next time out in 2 weeks, are going to be more, well, to not be a dead horse, consistent. I'm hoping, because if they are, then Season 9 will continue to take me on a very nice ride. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching, this has been the CC Network, and I will see you all next time.